Accessibility audits may feel daunting, but really they don't need to be. My name is Olena Buligina. I'm a senior UX consultant here at Envica, and I do a lot of accessibility work that ranges from audits to user testing for accessibility. I will be covering three things today: the different type of audits, steps of the quick and dirty approach that can be done anytime, and providing you an overview of larger official web content accessibility guidelines method. Before we start, what is accessibility evaluation? So this is a process that helps us understand how accessible is a product for people with disabilities or other special needs. It can be done in two ways: using guidelines or standards and not involving users, or including people, which is user testing for accessibility. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to focus on the audits, which means not involving users. There are two types of evaluation, which could be simple benchmarking, what is called summative. This is where an existing product or a service gets an audit and understanding how accessible it is. Think about it as accessibility benchmarking. And the second type of evaluation could be formative. This is where we identify issues and design them out as in the process as we go along. This is usually an iterative process. And also there are different types of audits. It could be automatic checking, manual checking, which may involve quick and dirty screening, accessibility audit by experts, or conformance evaluation or certification. I'm going to cover all those three types of audits. So first of all, automated checking. When do we use it? We use it on the initial versions. We use it as we build in the progress, as we go along. This is when we run a tool across code on the web page, and then the tool kind of does the work for us. It highlights violations and it highlights potential accessibility issues. However, there are several things that we need to understand before we do it. So first of all, not all guidelines can be checked automatically. What I mean by that is you could have an alternative text with an image, but without manual verification, how do you know that it's equivalent to information in an image? Second part is that not sure what guidelines and different tools are checked and how. Some of them check against WCAG 2.1, some don't. Third, you need a hi-fi prototype, at least, to run against the code. And finally, in my experience, one tool rarely does everything, which means you may need to use specific tool to check certain aspects like contrast checker. However, they are invaluable in supporting teams in design and build process. This is an example of one of those tools. This is Google Lighthouse that gives you a score, and which is, again, great for understanding. One number usually speaks to everybody in the team. However, it is possible to build a page with a perfect Lighthouse score that will not be accessible. So what is the value of automated audits? It really can catch easier some of the most obvious accessibility issues as you build and go along. But to give a better, fuller overview, there's always will be elements of manual work. Second part of today is quick and dirty screening. So how do we do it? What is it? This is where an expert is going through the website manually, reviewing accessibility. So what are the steps? How do we do it? How do we start? First, you need to check page titles. This means find the HTML tag that is associated with that. Usually it's done through view source option in browsers. Most of the modern browsers, they have this function built in. So every page has to have a meaningful title. This is how people who use assistive technologies will be navigating your website. Second part, turn off images. Again, this can be done through built-in functions in web browser. For example, in Google Chrome, there is an advanced option to turn images on and off. This is where you need to look for disappearing text. For example, a text that was embedded in images. It can be a phone number, it could be anything. And second part, what you also need to investigate is check the alternative text for problems, which means that it could be an image of, let's say, a cat, but an alt text will say it's an image of a dog. This is where you need to fix it. Number 3, using your computer sound options, turn off the sound and then check that the same information is transmitted. This is especially crucial for the website that is content heavy, where meaningful information that is relevant to users and their user journeys is also translated through sound. Number 4, using special plugin. For example, one of the most popular plugins for Google Chrome for testing accessibility is called Wave. And what it allows us to do, it allows us to apply different views on top of the page. One of them is grayscale. This is especially crucial to test grayscale and contrast for people who are colorblind. There are 2 types of color blindness: red, green, and blue-yellow. And when the original contrast is insufficient, it means that they don't quite see the differences in the menu, for example. Finally, step number 5, using just the keyboard. Try to operate and navigate the website or a page. What you need to look out for: whether everything is reachable. Are all the options, all the buttons, all the text is reachable with just the keyboard without using the mouse? Are all the functions operable? Can people press buttons if they don't have the mouse? And finally, if you have any forms, if there are interactive elements on the website, they have to keep focus with the keyboard, not just the mouse. This is how you can do it. You can just do it on the regular keyboard on your computer. And this is another solid way to establish in the very, very beginning whether your website or a page is working or not. Using the default controls for zoom. Get it to 200% zoom, 300% zoom, and then see whether anything pixelates or anything gets pushed out of view or anything that gets inoperable. This is how people who have visual impairments usually operate the internet. They zoom it to a certain level, so all the elements, they get larger and they're easier for them to see. And in my experience, what often happens is that some of the crucial elements may be breaking down, some of the text may be breaking down, some of the buttons may be off screen. Again, this is something you can catch at the early stages just by doing that. For step number 7, you don't need to be a coder. So check for formatting tables on layout. Remember heading tags. And see that all on the page, the information in the code is transmitted in a logical way. And what I mean by that is that heading tags H1, H2, H3, and so on and so forth, they have to follow the order 1, 2, 3. H1 tag can be only one on the page, and H3 has to come after H2, for example. This is something that you will learn as you progress with accessibility. Number 8, check multimedia alternatives. Web content accessibility guidelines, they list that you have to provide all the crucial, important information into forms that are alternative to multimedia. Usually this is the text. What they mean is that if there is a sound recording, it has to be duplicated through text. And just the availability of alternatives is a big accessibility step forward. There are some useful tools that they're also free that will help you on your accessibility journey, and that will assist your quick and dirty accessibility screens. So Wave Evaluation Tool As I said, this is a great browser plugin. I use it daily in my accessibility work. Then Lighthouse from Google. Again, it's free. It gives you accessibility score. It shows you violations. You still will need to go through them manually, but this is something that can be used by all team. And there are other things like Spark Contrast Checker for Sketch. If you're doing design work, this is something that will ensure that your designs, they already have contrast, accessible contrast baked in. The part 3 of this talk is about how to do an audit that is following web content accessibility guidelines evaluation method. So, but before we dive into deeper, there's another aspect I want to cover is, can you really do manual audits properly in-house? Or is it best to work with external specialists? So you can do quick and dirty accessibility audits on every stage of the product. You can follow the accessibility guidelines that are provided by the organization. However, to know whether your website is truly at a needed conformance level, you will need to work with experts who are certified to do the conformance audits. So, what we will be covering today is how to follow the evaluation method that is divided by web content accessibility guidelines to do accessibility audit. The method itself has 5 steps, and all the steps, they fit into each other. And the difference between what we just covered in this method is that this one takes more time, but also it creates a more actionable document for the whole team that allows you to catch most of the violations. How do we do this? So first of all, before we even start working, we need to define evaluation scope. So what is included, what parts of the website or a service are included, and what is the conformance level that we are looking at. There are 3 conformance levels: A, AA, and AAA. And if you're a part of a government website, then you probably know that in some countries they now have to be AA conformance level, like in Canada. So this is the first thing that you need to agree internally with your team. Step 2, explore the target website. So what I mean by this is you need to set up a scope before you do any accessibility audit work. Modern websites, they are large. They will have sections and subsections and different parts of the website. And even if you're just starting, even if it's your first audit, you don't need to do all the work at once. So think about your key web pages. Think about their functionality and set the scope as the step 2. Number 3. Here, you need to think about what pages to check, because not all of them are created equal from the accessibility perspective. What I mean by this is that most likely you have common and popular pages. You have pages that are less used. And then you also, what helps me think is thinking in user journeys. What I mean by this is that your users go through a website to complete a task or a series of tasks. What are the pages that get into this flow? For more popular, for core user journeys, you will need to audit every page of the step. And another thing is that with the way the websites are built, there's a big chance that you are using templates, you are using elements that are repeating throughout the website. Identifying them and auditing them just once instead of every time will also help you distribute the accessibility work easier. This is an important step. So this is where the core of the work happens. This is where you open the guidelines and then check the set of pages against every guideline, making notes into whether they're making it or breaking it. Let me focus on this in details. So for each page, you manually inspect each of the elements. And then how do you find violations? So first of all, looking at the page and looking for the problems. All the guidelines, they literally tell you what to check. For example, all the animations that are longer than a certain amount of seconds have to have control elements such as play and pause. So if you have something like that on a page, and if you see that you don't have the control elements, that's a violation. Then also you have to look at the code and look for the problems, because some of the accessibility problems, they are directly connected with code. But again, web content accessibility guidelines provide sufficient and enough and full information, so you don't need to be a full-scale developer to be able to do the job. And also another thing that is absolutely crucial to be done for every page is running a screen reader and listening for problems or noise. How I personally do that, I sometimes close my eyes or use a sleep mask if I need, and then I just try to do what needs to be done on the page, which by this I mean every page has a purpose. It could be filling a form, it could be adding a product to a basket, it could be learning about something. And I try to use that page with my eyes closed. And how do you define noise? So if there is something that doesn't make sense to you when you close your eyes and try to do it with a screen reader, it means that it most likely it won't make sense for people who have visual impairments. A couple of words on the screen reader. If you're using Apple computers, Apple notebooks, they have a built-in screen reader that can just be turned on and off. If you're using Windows machine, most likely you will have to install a dedicated software such as JAWS. So it is depending on the system, and they work a bit differently, and you have to use the one you have, obviously. Now, after you do this, then you need to think about the severity for each issue. And this can be a tricky subject, especially if you're just beginning. So this is how I think about this. I think about what types of users are affected. Because, for example, if the page is overloaded by graphic elements, if the logic makes no sense, it means it would be not working for people with visual impairments, but also for people with cognitive impairments, but also if it's also not operable without mouse, that it means that people who have motor impairments also will be affected. And then I think about the scope and severity, which is how much will this affect them? Because the goal of this audit is to provide an actionable list of issues that and fixes for them that are crucial for progress in the development for work on this web page, for example. So this means that unfortunately we cannot fix everything at once, and we need to prioritize. And also think about the severity of how this will affect them. For example, if they're not able to complete a crucial task, like adding tickets to the basket, this is severe. But if it is more like user experience issue, where they still can do the task, but it's just, let's say, clunky, this is different level of severity. And this is where you go through all the pages that you need to audit, and you repeat the same over and over again. Usually at the end of this stage, I have a massive spreadsheet that has all the guidelines, all the violations. And also, if you're using templates, if the site is built on CMS, if there's a lot of automation, then you will also here at this stage need to think about how much of the site is affected. If, for example, if there is one major accessibility issue in the top menu or in the footer, then by fixing it, you are fixing it throughout the whole website. Finally, a big part of this method is reporting the findings. So this is how web content accessibility guidelines, how they recommend to do it. So first of all, you start with executive summary, where you say that you did this work and these are the results. Are they, did you get to a level of conformance? Did you not get to the level of conformance? What are the most issues that needs to be fixed? Then you describe the scope, the amount of pages, conformance level that you were looking at, all the plugins, all the tools that you use. This is useful, first of all, for continuity for this work inside your team. And second, it will be useful for your other team members who may not be doing the audit, but they may need this information. And then you just lay out everything that you found, examples of them, explanations of the scope and severity, how exactly do they make your website inaccessible. And then this is the moment, the opportunity to educate. With the findings, with the suggested fixes, you need to give enough detail to fix the problem. And ideally with links to other websites, with as many information as needed to help those who will be fixing it. And then the rest of the information goes to appendices. Here I usually keep the full spreadsheet of all the violations, all the guidelines, all the issues. However, there is one big detail that absolutely needs to be highlighted, is that this approach, it cannot replace a full-scale audit and user testing, because the value of testing for accessibility is that sometimes you can have a conformant website, but it doesn't mean it's actually accessible. Sometimes the product can be technically compliant, but people will not be able to use it because of that. And this is the most important thing. Thank you.